Which guns do you think are the most overused guns in the Warzone meta right now? I'm going to talk about my answer to that question and more right now. Hello and welcome. I am Medio602, and if this is your first time on the channel and you want to improve at Call of Duty, then start now by subscribing and ringing the notification bell so you don't miss out on tips, tricks, and tactics to make you a better player. To kick things off, this first clip is about the most meta experience you can have in the game right now. You've got one group driving around in a vehicle, and then you've got me with C4, a Grau, and an MP5. The C4 right now is the most powerful and most meta lethal you can have, but we're not really here to talk about the lethals or the tacticals today. Nah, we're here to talk more about the guns. And specifically, we're going to hit on the Grau quite a bit, and the MP5 just a little bit. For anyone who might have come to this video just looking for a Grau best class loadout, I've got one on the screen right now. I've also got a full video dedicated to building your best loadout. We're going to have a link to that in the description as well as a card up on the top of the screen right now. And the first thing I want to talk about is this Grau. And anyone who's been playing Warzone recently, this gun, I swear right now it's showing up in my kill feed more than every other gun in the game combined. And I don't think the Grau is ultra powerful or anything, I just think it's really easy to use and it's very popular because a lot of popular streamers are out there using it right now. It's also the only assault rifle, as far as I know, that has purple tracers available, and those purple bullets, whew, I feel like those purple bullets do more damage than the regular ones, but we're getting off topic here. The Grau shoots at a relatively low rate of fire at around 730 RPM. It also has very low recoil to match that low rate of fire, and I really think that's the key to the Grau right now. Not only does it have such low recoil, it's also got fantastic range, and it really just has no weakness. Of course, being a slower rate of fire assault rifle, it's not great in close quarters combat, but it definitely can hold its own. Now, of course, you could compare the Grau to the M4A1, which is probably the second most assault rifle. It was the most popular for a really long time, but after a few different nerfs, I would say the Grau is more popular right now. The M4 has higher recoil and slower base ADS time than the Grau. The M4's also got a little bit faster fire rate, so it's a little bit better in close quarters than the Grau. But again, you're talking about an assault rifle here, and they're really not meant for close quarters, they're meant for long range. You might also think that the M13 is a good competitor to the Grau, and really it has a better time to kill than the Grau at longer ranges. The M13 also fires faster than the Grau. And after the Grau gets nerfed, my prediction is that the M13 is going to become the big meta weapon next, just because of all these traits. There are a couple of things holding the M13 back in my opinion. The first of those things is that it's not nearly as good in close quarters. The time to kill is about 100 milliseconds slower than the Grau. And with the M13, since it shoots so much faster than the Grau, you go through a lot of ammo. So for those hyper-aggressive players, or the players who just have trouble hitting some of their shots, they're going to run out of ammo a whole lot faster with the M13 than they are the Grau. The other popular assault rifle right now, and my personal favorite out of this whole bunch, is the Ram. But if you compare the Ram to the Grau, the Ram just doesn't have quite the same range as the Grau, mostly due to a higher recoil, not as clear iron sights, and a maximum of 50 rounds in the magazine. The Ram makes up for this at closer ranges, where it's got a faster time to kill than the Grau, and the accuracy isn't as big of a deal. But with all of these guns, if you compare the iron sights, the Archangel barrel on the Grau is just head and shoulders above the rest, which really saves you an attachment. I like to use that extra attachment on a foregrip, and that just helps with the recoil even more. Add up all these things, you really just get the best all-around assault rifle right now in Warzone, and that's the Grau. Now that we've compared the Grau to some of the other popular assault rifles, we can talk about how I would like to see the Grau balanced in the mid-season patch that Joe Cecot has promised will contain some weapon tuning changes. First, I don't want to see the other guns buffed to the point of the Grau, and this is because I feel like the time to kill in Warzone is already too fast, especially if you don't have any armor equipped. Normally, I would be a big fan of buffing the other weapons to the point of power that this one has, but in this case I feel like a nerf is in order. And there are a few different nerfs that I've considered, and I would like to see one of the following 3 things done to the Grau. Keep in mind that when I'm talking about these nerfs, I don't want to destroy the gun completely, I still want it to be competitive, I just want it to be a little bit less dominant in the overall meta of the game. To achieve that, I think what we need to do is really specialize this weapon. And I believe that the role that the Grau is trying to fulfill is what the M4 used to be, and that is a versatile, low recoil, easy to use gun, easy to pick up, get some kills with, and move on. So because of that, I really don't want to touch the recoil that much, and I'd hate to nerf the range of any weapon in Warzone, so this really just leaves us with a few different choices. The first thing, and I think that this is my favorite of the three, would be to lower the rate of fire on this gun slightly. I'd like to see about a 5% reduction to the rate of fire on the Grau. This would take it right around 700 RPM. It would decrease the recoil even more because of how recoil works in Call of Duty, and it would make it far less likely that you just get laser beamed from across the map by someone just holding in the trigger, spraying full auto. In addition to those things, the Grau would also be less effective at close range, which would help to distinguish it from the M4 and the Ram, both of which are better at close range. Now, if Infinity Ward doesn't want to mess with the RPM, I would also be okay with increasing the recoil on the Grau just a little bit. Now, I'm not talking about anything insane here. I would just like to see it more difficult to hit targets at longer range by holding in the trigger full auto. I am a big believer that if you just burst fire a weapon, it should be far more effective than if you just hold in full auto, and this game doesn't really have a lot of that because the first couple of shots out of a lot of these weapons have higher recoil than the following shots. And if Infinity Ward doesn't want to decrease the RPM, and they don't want to increase the recoil, then the third possible nerf that I personally would be happy with would be an increased aim down sights time. And what this would do is, kind of like with the lower rate of fire, it would make the gun less effective in close quarters. And it would also make it so that people at medium ranges didn't have quite as good of an effective time to kill, while people at long ranges who were already scoped in on a target wouldn't see much difference. With the Grau out of the way, let's talk about the second most popular weapon in the meta right now, and that's the MP5. On the MP5, I like the monolithic integral suppressor, the 45 round magazine, the stippled grip tape, the Merc foregrip, and the FSS close quarter stock. The role of the MP5 is that it is the fast-killing SMG, as long as you're accurate. The first couple of shots have very high recoil and are much harder to control than the rest of the magazine, but the weapon's very rewarding to use, especially if you can land headshots at close range. The MP5, in my opinion, is not quite as bad as the Grau when it comes to lack of variety in gameplay, and because of this, rather than nerfing the MP5, I'd like to see some buffs to the other submachine guns. The two submachine guns I think are in biggest need of buffs would be the Striker 45 and the Uzi. The Striker could stand to either shoot a little bit faster or do a little bit more damage, and it needs a lot more ammunition in order to be useful in Warzone. And the Uzi just isn't very accurate. Right now the MP7 is really the go-to submachine gun for longer range, and I'd like to see the Uzi have a little bit better recoil and try to fight that MP7 for that top spot. And I believe we could get there if the Uzi just had better accuracy. In other words, I'd like to see a huge decrease to the recoil on the Uzi, because as of right now, it is much easier to control the MP7, which shoots at about 950 RPM, than it is to control that Uzi, which is shooting at about half that fire rate. As for other weapon balancing I would like to see, I really don't see any reason to use a sniper rifle other than the HDR right now, so I would like to see some buffs to the DRAGUNOV or perhaps the AX50. And I would just like to see some across-the-board buffs to marksman rifles and light machine guns. In the game's current state right now, I don't see any reason to have any light machine guns or any marksman rifles on any of my loadouts in Warzone. For anyone that played Blackout, you might remember that there was a fairly significant buff to the light machine guns in Blackout at one point, and that was increased damage to vehicles. I'd like to see something similar for the light machine guns in Warzone, and I'm really not sure what to do about the marksman rifles to balance them out. I feel like marksman rifles, just by their very nature, are always going to be just a little bit worse than sniper rifles for very long ranges, but I feel like we should do something to make them better than assault rifles at those mid to long range engagements. That's where a marksman rifle really should be beating out an M4, and I think the best way to get there with the marksman rifles is just an increase across the board in the rate of fire, as well as headshot multiplier. The other thing you could do is an across-the-board nerf to the range on assault rifles, and when I say range I'm really talking about bullet velocity here, so that if you're using an assault rifle then you have to lead your target and account for more bullet drop than you do today, but I feel like there would be a lot of backlash from the community on that one. I think a lot of people would be really upset if they did that, so I really don't see that as a possibility. In this big weapon rebalance, I think we should also talk about the perks and the equipment. Right now I feel like the C4 is far too effective against vehicles. A C4 should not be able to blow up an SUV unless it hits the SUV. I've seen far too many instances where the C4 was nowhere near the SUV and it still exploded and killed everyone in the vehicle. As for tactical equipment, I'm really not sure what to do here, but I do not like that Ghost counters both UAVs and the heartbeat sensor. I feel like this makes Ghost a far too valuable perk in the tier 2 slot. And I would like to see Ghost only work on a UAV if the player is moving, and I'd like to see the heartbeat sensor broken up into two pieces. I'd like to see one perk, which completely counters it like Ghost does today, only that can't be Ghost. That's gotta be another perk. But just so we don't completely destroy Ghost, what Ghost should do is still make the sound on the heartbeat sensor, but not give the location of the player away. That way you still have a general idea that somebody's camping in a building, but you're not quite sure where, unless they're using the hard counter perk, which I believe should be something in Tier 1, probably cold-blooded. As an alternative, we could also have a perk in Tier 3 such as Tracker, which would counter the counter to the heartbeat sensor. What other weapon and equipment tuning changes would you like to see for the mid-season patch? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. After you subscribe, go ahead and check out some of my other videos on the screen right now. And as always, thank you very much for watching.